For my final project, I interviewed Zachary Rodgers, who is the manager for Garmin J at the Four Seasons Hotel in Chicago. Zach has worked at the Four Seasons for 6 years, and for the first year and a half, he worked on the grill station. He was then diagnosed with a rare heart condition that caused him to have open heart surgery, and he couldn't work for 3 months. When he came back after being off for 3 months, he was placed in the Garmin J department, which was not run by anybody except for it was overseen by the head chef of the events kitchen upstairs. And he kind of just overseen and made sure that things got done, but he was never really actually in the kitchen overseeing things. And Zach said that it made him crazy that there was no structure. So he took initiative and matters into his own hands, and people saw what he did, and he was then eventually given the position as manager of Garmin J. Zach works in a room, in a kitchen full of women, and I am one of them. I'm doing my internship at the Four Seasons, and I was placed in the Garmin J department, and I've worked with Zach for almost 3 months now, and he's a great person to work with. He keeps everyone's spirits up, and he really just tries to keep everyone motivated and going, and he's silly sometimes, but when it's time to get down to business, he knows what needs to be done. And so when I was given the opportunity to interview Zach, I was kind of excited because I had no idea how he does what he does. Even though I see him every single day, it's a crazy industry, and it's a crazy world in the hotel to work there. And the first question I asked him was, what is the best way to communicate with the staff and how to keep them motivated, because he works in a room full of women, and they're very opinionated. They're not easy to work with. So I asked him what was the best way of communication, and he said that he found the best way to communicate with his staff was to be as honest as possible, and that he had to be clear in what he wanted and what he expected, and he never talked down to everyone. He never yells at anyone, and he treats people as people. He doesn't try to talk down to anyone and make them think that he's superior than them, even though there's established respect knowing that he runs that kitchen. I then asked him how did he go about making the decisions in his position, and he said that you have to trust all the bits and pieces. That's what he said, bits and pieces of the knowledge that you've picked up over time. It also has a lot to do with the politics of the kitchen, and you have to know how to push people and how to motivate them and what motivates people. And he says that as a manager, it's his job to really find out what those things are that motivate people to keep going. And I also then asked what his number one go-to resolution for a conflict, because not everyone is always going to get along in a kitchen, and in our kitchen, since it's a room full of women, not everyone gets along. And so when I asked him that, he said that the number one solution or resolution to a conflict was to find out all the facts. He says that he tries to get to the root of the problem, or what actually happened, and gathers as much information from different people as he can about the situation, and then approaches it, because he says that not every situation can be approached the same way, because there's always different circumstances, and the person who caused the conflict or is the root of the conflict is not always going to tell the whole truth. So he said that he just tries to gather facts and make sure he knows as much as possible before he approaches the situation. I then went on to ask Zach about his philosophy of the best way to manage people. And he said that the best way to manage people was to treat them as people and not just someone that he works with every day. He said that you have to get to know them and find out what motivates them and how their brain works. And you really have to find their strong points because as a job, it's his job as a manager to find out what people are good at that work for him. And he said, which I thought was the silliest thing, I also said that he likes to use the 80% rule. And I looked at it and I said, what is the 80% rule? Like, what does that even mean? And he said that the 80% rule is you work your people at 80%. And most of the time, so that when you need 100%, it's there to give. And because he also said that if you work people at 100% all the time, they can crack. And then you're just end up with a kitchen full of tired, angry people. I then asked Zach what was the best way for him to relieve stress in such a stressful environment, like how he gets away. And he said that the best way for him to relieve stress is golf or essentially anything that requires a lot of focus, because he said that his job has a way of always being there. It's always around him. He said literally that he cooks in his sleep, and he talks about it, and his wife finds it very entertaining to get him going. And I remember in the interview he says that she asked him what he said, and he said, I said the steak is medium rare, but he shouted it out as if he was working in the kitchen environment. So literally, Zach says he lives and breathes everything that has to do with the kitchen. So to relieve his stress from the kitchen, he has to do something that takes his mind completely off of it. And his just happens to be golf. And I then after I asked about how he relieves his stress, I asked him what his biggest mistake was, because after I've worked in the kitchen with them for so long, I realized that nobody in the kitchen is perfect and nobody does everything right. And so I asked him what his biggest mistake was and how he came back from that mistake. And he said that his biggest mistake was thinking that he could accomplish everything by himself. And I could completely see Zach doing that, because he just, when in stressful modes, he just kind of like goes quiet and just is like running around like a busybody, doing things and trying to accomplish everything. He's like, I'll do it. And so I can totally see where he's coming from there. He thinks that like he can do everything on his own when the pressure's on. But he said that, which I thought was really wise of him, he said that you have to ask for help sometimes, but you have to do it before it's too late. Because if it's too late, then it's too late. You can't ask for help anymore, which I thought was really, really smart of him. And I was glad that I asked him that question, because sometimes I'm afraid to ask for help, but now knowing that he asked for help makes it easier for me to ask for help. And coming back from that, I then asked him what was the greatest joy that he got out of his job. And he said that his greatest joy was he said he loved the process of cooking. And he said that you gather all this knowledge and little bits of pieces of that add to a whole, and in the end you can give someone something that can bring so many feelings and experiences. And he told me a story about every time he smells cantaloupe, it always reminds him and like takes him back to his grandma's house in the summertime. And that's the kind of thing he enjoys the most, is giving someone an experience out of the food that he's made for them. He also said that he loves doing his job because it's a job that not everyone can do. And I said in my paper that it takes a special kind of person to work in this industry, and I really believe that because I feel like you have to have a little bit of an off switch to work in the industry. And we always make jokes and saying that everyone's a little bit weird. But it really is true. It takes a special kind of person to work in the kitchen because you're running on empty all the time. You're constantly going, going, going. You never have time to stop. And so I feel like it takes a special person to be able to do that and to be able to accomplish the things that they accomplish in this industry. And to wrap up our interview, I then asked Zach what was the most valuable thing that he has learned over the years that has made his job easier. And he says that the most valuable thing I've learned is to not dwell on your mistakes and to learn from them and move on. Because he said that if he doesn't let go of the things that he's messed up on, that it eats away at him and that it can really bog you down. And I think that is the best advice you can give someone. And then I know that whenever I'm having a hard time at work, Zach is always a person that I'm going to go to and I'm going to talk to about it. And every single time that I talk to him, oh my God.